Think about the most emotionally devastating scene in your favorite movie. You probably think you were moved by the brilliant, tragic dialogue or, maybe the sweeping orchestral score.
Right, the music usually gets all the credit.
Yeah, exactly. But according to the textbooks we're diving into today, your brain was actually manipulated by a mathematical equation.
A very precise equation, yeah.
Like an equation made up of precise camera angles, hidden prop placements, and most importantly, the words the writer deliberately refused to let the actors say.
It really is the ultimate manufacture of reality. I mean, when you sit in a theater, you are essentially submitting to a psychological operation.
A psychological operation, I love that phrasing.
It's true, though.
Yeah.
The creator isn't just showing you a sequence of events. They are hacking your subconscious to dictate exactly how and when you feel vulnerability or power or dread.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. We have a very custom-tailored mission for you today. Whether you are outlining your own screenplay, analyzing media for a project, or, you're just insanely curious about the hidden architecture behind the media you consume. We are pulling the curtain back.
We really are.
We're looking at two foundational sources today. The film production Handbook by Paul D. Bastolarides and an incredibly dense, insightful essay simply titled On Screenwriting.
Both are fantastic resources.
Yeah, and together these sources strip away the magic to reveal the cold, hard mechanics of storytelling and visual literacy. Okay, let's unpack this, because long before a director yells action, the manipulation of the audience's mind begins on the page with the unsaid.
Yeah, screenwriting is frequently misunderstood as just the art of writing clever dialogue.
Just snappy comebacks.
Exactly. But our sources argue that it is primarily an exercise in withholding. Since we're dealing with Hemingway's famous iceberg theory here, the sources point out that the real heavy lifting isn't in what's written on the page, but in the negative space of the script.
The negative space.
Right, the visible narrative. The tip of the iceberg is intentionally minimal. The massive, dangerous emotional weight lies beneath the surface. And the text points to Hemingway's classic short story, Hills Like White Elephants, as the prime example of this mechanism in action.
Right, so in that story, we have a man and a woman waiting at a train station bar in Spain, having what looks like just a mundane conversation about the drinks and the scenery.
Yeah, just talking about the hills.
Yeah.
But the underlying unspoken tension is about whether the woman will have an abortion.
Oh, wow.
And Hemingway builds this immense, suffocating pressure entirely through avoidance. The word abortion is never once spoken in the entire text.
Not once.
Not even once. Instead, the mechanism of the story is the characters talking around the issue. They focus on the hills looking like white elephants. They focus on the taste of the licorice in their drinks. By forcing the characters to avoid the trauma, Hemingway forces the reader's brain to fill in that massive emotional gap.
Wait, so deliberately frustrating the audience is the goal here. You're saying the writer is intentionally concealing the emotional core just to make the reader's brain work harder.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like a magician's misdirection. Look at this ordinary conversation over here, while the real emotional devastation happens completely out of sight.
What's fascinating here is that cognitive friction is exactly what breeds engagement. When a writer spoon-feeds exposition, the audience becomes passive.
They just sit back and consume it.
Exactly. But when the writer forces you to connect the dots through the negative space, you become an active participant. Your brain has to resolve the tension, which makes the narrative deeply personal. And this applies to character structure as well. The text brings up J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, a classic.
Right, and Salinger abandons the traditional action-driven plot completely. The plot is simply Holden Caulfield's flawed humanity.
Because he just wanders around post-war New York complaining about phonies. I mean, there is no external dragon to slay in that book.
Right, the dragon is his own hypocrisy. The narrative mechanism relies on the friction between what Holden claims are his values and how he actually behaves.
Yeah, he's constantly contradicting himself.
He is. He projects these personas that contradict his internal monologue. And Salinger uses that dissonance to mirror the reader's own internal contradictions. And taking structural rebellion even further, the essay highlights Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse.
Okay, Woolf is notoriously complex.
She is, because she recognized that human emotion and memory do not move in a chronological straight line.
Right. But so how do you actually format fragmented consciousness on the page without completely losing the reader? Like, how does that work practically?
By manipulating the syntax to mimic the rapid overlapping firing of synapses. Woolf's narrative flows seamlessly between the internal thoughts of different characters in the exact same room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a single sentence might start with a character observing a bowl of fruit, pivot mid-comma to a traumatic childhood memory, and then end with the perspective of someone else watching them look at the fruit.
That sounds chaotic.
It is. But she dismantles the linear plot to accurately capture the chaotic mechanism of human perception.
Okay, but if the heavy lifting of a story happens in the negative space, in the silences, the avoidance, or the chaotic internal monologues, what happens when characters actually have to speak? I mean, if you're listening to this and you've ever tried writing a script, you know the absolute terror of your characters just sounding like slightly different versions of yourself arguing in an empty room.
Oh, the dreaded author mouthpiece.
Yes.
Yeah, the sources offer a rather brutal mechanism for fixing that, referred to as the cover the name test. It's essentially a diagnostic tool for distinct dialogue.
I really love the mechanics of this. It's essentially a blind taste test for your writing.
Yes.
Like if you take the labels off a Coke and a generic cola, you should instantly know which is which. So if you physically cover the character names on the left side of your script and read the dialogue aloud, and you can't taste the difference in the syntax, your script is flat.
Exactly. A failure of the test means your characters are interchangeable. They're just plot delivery devices. Because speech is fundamentally a trauma response and a cultural fingerprint. A character who survived extreme poverty will not use the same cadence, vocabulary, or even the same hesitation as a character who grew up with generational wealth.
They wouldn't even argue the same way.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
One might weaponize silence while the other weaponizes vocabulary. If two characters sound identical, the illusion of reality shatters completely.
And sometimes the most distinct fingerprint is pure physical action. The essay points to the minimalist master Raymond Carver, specifically his short story, Popular Mechanics.
Such a powerful example.
It really is. We have a couple whose relationship is violently imploding. The man is packing to leave, the woman is furious, and then a physical struggle begins over their baby.
And Carver communicates the entirety of their mutual hatred without a single word of explanatory dialogue during the climax.
Right, there's no screaming monologue. No one yells, I'm taking the baby because you ruined my life. The hatred is entirely communicated through the raw physical torque of the struggle.
A physical tension.
Yeah. The gripping of the child's arm, the slipping of hands. The story ends with a terrifyingly ambiguous line. In this manner, the issue was decided.
Which is chilling.
It is. Carver trusts the reader's visceral reaction to the physical violence to replace an entire page of dialogue, which is a great tool for you to take away from this. Look for those Carver moments in the media you consume, where the silence and the physicality do all the screaming.
Absolutely.
But Carver pulls that off with prose. He can describe the tension in their knuckles. If I'm a director, I can't just write, "They struggled silently" on the screen. How do I force the viewer's eye to feel that exact same tension without the benefit of prose? We have to move from the page to the lens.
Well, that requires mastering visual literacy. Film is inherently a pre-verbal medium. Yet, before a single line of dialogue is processed by the auditory cortex, the visual cortex has already established the emotional baseline of the scene. And the history of how we develop this visual vocabulary is remarkably bizarre. The Film Production Handbook details the story of Edward Muybridge, the so-called father of motion pictures.
Who didn't even set out to invent cinema.
Not at all. In the 1870s, he was hired by Leland Stanford, the governor of California, to settle a bet.
A bet.
Yeah. Stanford believed that when a horse gallops, there is a moment when all four hooves leave the ground simultaneously.
Okay.
So Muybridge rigged a sequence of tripwire cameras along a racetrack. When he rapidly projected those sequential images, he inadvertently created the first moving picture.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the guy who accidentally invents the foundation of Hollywood was also a murderer.
He was, yeah.
It's wild.
While he was pioneering these photographic studies, he discovered his wife was having an affair. He tracked down her lover, shot him point blank, went to trial, and was completely acquitted on the grounds of justifiable homicide. He essentially pleaded temporary insanity.
Such a wildly dark origin story. But once Muybridge gives us the technology of motion, filmmakers suddenly have to figure out how to give those moving pictures an emotional syntax. They have to build a visual language completely from scratch.
They did, and they realized quickly that camera placement physically alters the viewer's psychology. It taps into our evolutionary biology.
How so?
Well, if a director uses a low angle, placing the camera near the floor and pointing it up at a character, it triggers the primal feeling of looking up at a predator. The character instantly projects dominance and threat.
Oh, I see.
Conversely, a high angle looking down diminishes the subject. It triggers our instinctual recognition of vulnerability or prey. You feel the power dynamic instantly, without a single word.
Okay, that covers primal emotion. What about complex information? What happens when a movie has to explain dense historical background without boring the audience to death? We've all seen bad exposition where two characters awkwardly tell each other things they both already know, just for the audience's benefit.
Oh yeah, that is the ultimate failure of visual literacy. Good exposition uses blocking, which is the physical movement of actors, and props to mask the information dump.
To hide it in plain sight.
Exactly. The textbook highlights a masterful example from Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The scene requires a wealthy patron to explain the dense ancient history of the Holy Grail to Indiana Jones. It is essentially a 4-minute academic lecture inserted into an action movie.
Which should bring the pacing to a dead halt.
It really should. But Spielberg hides the lecture in the visual dynamics. The characters don't just sit in armchairs. They pace around a lavish office. They physically interact with a stone Grail tablet. They pour and pass a glass of wine. They lean over an ancient manuscript.
Right, because Indiana Jones is an archaeologist.
Yes, so the physical interaction with the artifacts makes the high-level debate entirely plausible. The viewer's eye is constantly tracking movement and objects, so their brain absorbs the exposition without feeling lectured to.
Show, don't tell even when you're literally telling. And sometimes you bypass the human element altogether. The text points to the film Three Colors, Blue, which deals with a woman consumed by grief after the sudden death of her husband and child. But the cinematographer doesn't just push in on a close-up of her crying.
No, the camera holds a long, meditative focus on a white sugar cube slowly absorbing dark coffee.
The sugar cubes soaking up the black liquid, it is a perfect visual metaphor. It tells the viewer everything about how grief operates, how the darkness slowly, inevitably bleeds into every porous part of your life until you are entirely consumed by it. No tears, no screaming, just the physics of coffee and sugar.
It's brilliant visual storytelling.
So we have all these incredibly potent visual and psychological tools, but they have to be calibrated differently depending on the narrative. I mean, the tools you use to build a slasher film are fundamentally different from the ones you use to build a historical romance. How do our sources organize these mechanics by genre?
The sources offer a fascinating comparative analysis between the thriller genre and the drama genre. Let's look at thrillers first.
Okay.
The text cites Boris Karloff, the legendary 1920s horror icon who established a critical distinction between terror and horror. According to Karloff, a thriller operates on terror.
Terror. Got it.
Terror is the weaponization of the unknown. It relies on psychological dread and implicit threats. The mechanism here is that the director gives the audience just enough visual information to force their own imagination to construct the worst possible scenario.
So terror is the shadow stretching across the wall. It makes the viewer do the work of scaring themselves. Horror, on the other hand, is the monster actually jumping out and biting someone's head off.
Exactly the distinction. Horror is explicit. The unknown is eliminated, replaced by repugnant graphic reality. Terror is considered the higher artistry because sustaining that psychological tension requires absolute mastery of pacing.
And drama.
Drama operates on a completely different structural foundation.
Right.
It relies heavily on the ancient Greek principles defined by Aristotle.
And before you think we're getting too academic here, the essay actually uses Disney's The Lion King to map out this ancient Greek architecture, which is just brilliant.
It perfectly illustrates that these ancient structures are still the bedrock of modern blockbusters. Aristotle's framework requires pathos, which is emotion, ethos morality, and logos logic. But the actual narrative engine runs on two specific plot mechanics, aneuresis and peripeteia.
Okay, let's break those down. In The Lion King, we have a classic tragedy structure. Simba is the protagonist, Scar is the antagonist. The anagnoresis, which translates to the critical discovery or recognition of truth, happens when Simba finally realizes that Scar, not himself, is responsible for his father's death.
And that realization is the mechanism that triggers the peripeteia, which is the sudden reversal of fortune. Simba pivots from exile to reclaiming the throne.
But why does the human brain require those specific beats? Why can't Simba just beat up Scar in the second act and call it a day?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the human brain requires the anagnoresis because we need to see the protagonist achieve self-awareness. Without the recognition of truth, any subsequent victory feels unearned and hollow.
Ah, I see.
The reversal of fortune only provides emotional catharsis if it is fueled by a moral awakening. whether it is the psychological dread of a thriller manipulating your imagination with terror, or the moral awakening of an animated lion triggering a reversal of fortune. The genre is simply a delivery mechanism for processing human trauma and triumph.
All right, we have pulled apart the psychology of the negative space. We've tested dialogue with the cover the name blind taste test. We've translated words into visual literacy with camera angles and sugar cubes, and we've organized those tools by genre. So how do we actually sequence all of this into a functioning blueprint?
This brings us to the author's 10-step blueprint for narrative writing, detailed in the essay. Though, notably, the author consolidates the actual philosophy into 5 intense guiding rules.
Let's unpack these rules because they are essentially the load-bearing walls of any script.
Rule 1, write honest. This means stripping away your own ego. You cannot write a character based on how you want the audience to perceive you as a writer. You must write how human beings actually behave in their darkest moments.
Which is hard to do.
Very hard. Rule 2, check yourself. This is a mechanism to ensure your narrative isn't just a thinly veiled soapbox for your political or social grievances. The story must come before the sermon.
I am pushing back on Rule 3, though. If it bleeds, it reads. Isn't that just a cheap journalism tactic to sell sensationalist headlines?
In news, yes, absolutely. But in narrative writing, the author uses it to mean you must write about what genuinely causes you anxiety. If the concept doesn't make you feel a sense of vulnerability or emotional bleeding, the audience won't feel anything either.
Oh, wait, that makes sense.
Rule 4 is simply just write, bypassing the internal editor that paralyzes creativity. And Rule 5, observe and reflect. This is the analytical pass where you ensure the structure holds water. But the absolute core of this entire blueprint, the foundation the house is built on, is the pursuit of the one honest sentence.
The thesis statement of the movie?
Yes. The author's method requires finding the single absolute truth of your story and then aggressively refining it through at least 3 drafts until you hit the emotional bedrock. If you fail to find that honest sentence, no amount of brilliant camera angles or snappy dialogue will prevent the narrative from collapsing.
The essay illustrates this refinement process using Star Wars, which is the perfect stress test because on the surface, Star Wars is entirely about spectacle. You know, lightsabers, the Death Star, alien cantinas. But none of that is the honest sentence.
Let's walk through the hypothetical refinement.
Yep.
Draft 1 of the honest sentence for Star Wars might be, the fate of the universe could be with one person.
Which is factually accurate to the plot, but it's emotionally dead. I mean, it doesn't tell the director or the actors anything about how to play a scene.
Exactly. So the writer revises. Draft 2, one person desiring change can make a lasting impact.
It has a bit more humanity. It focuses on the desire for change. But it's still entirely generic. You could slap that sentence onto a sports movie about an underdog baseball team, and it would still fit perfectly.
Which means it isn't specific enough to be the blueprint. So you dig deeper into the thematic core. Graph 3, the final refined, honest sentence. One's spiritual beliefs and action can transcend oppression and change the fate of the universe through perspective.
Wow. That shifts the entire weight of the movie.
Exactly. That is the true narrative blueprint. Notice that there are no spaceships in that sentence. By grounding the entire multi-million-dollar production on the concept of spiritual beliefs transcending oppression, every single scene has an emotional compass. The spectacle is just set dressing built on top of that rock-solid, honest sentence.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means the next time you sit down to watch a film or sit down to write one, you don't have to be overwhelmed by the noise and the color. You have a shortcut to see the architecture.
A roadmap, really.
Yeah. You can look at a conversation and see the iceberg Hemingway talked about. You can listen to the dialogue and run the cover the name test in your head to see if the characters have a real fingerprint. You can spot when a director is using a low angle to hack your primal fear or hiding a dense history lesson behind the passing of a wine glass. You can see the blueprint.
This raises an important question, though. A final thought experiment that wasn't directly answered in our texts today, but builds inherently on the mechanics we've just discussed. We have established today that cinema is fundamentally an illusion.
Right.
It is a trick of the eye, a manipulation of light and psychology designed to convey an honest, emotional truth to the audience.
It's a manufactured reality built to make us feel something genuine.
But look at the technological threshold we are crossing right now. As we rapidly move into an era of artificial intelligence and generative video, where a machine can invent flawlessly photorealistic humans, environments, and physical struggles that never existed in reality. How will our definition of visual truth change.
Oh, man.
If the visual illusion becomes absolutely perfect and entirely synthetic, does the emotional honesty of the human writer become the only anchor we have left to reality? Or does the concept of an honest sentence become entirely obsolete in a medium where nothing was ever real to begin with?
That is a staggering thought. If the entire skyscraper is eventually made of digital smoke generated by an algorithm, does the human blueprint even matter anymore? It brings us right back to the core of why we study this. We analyze the illusion to figure out what parts of our humanity are real enough to survive it. Something for you to ponder the next time you sit in a dark theater letting the shadows and light wash over you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.